So this is a commission that I'm doing from, not from, but for rather my sister who's Native American, and she would like a hummingbird, which she sees as a messenger of good news and is like her favorite animal, with the four sacred medicines, which would be cedar, tobacco, um, sage, and sweetgrass. So I have drawn it out, and now I am just going through the first process of inking it. Since I already went through the trouble of drawing it, I'm going to go ahead and use it for my practicing of using my Copics and watercolors, and then she can just decide which she likes best or if she likes both of them. But then I will put it up in my Etsy shop when I'm all done. So, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to get the camera to film better. Um, it doesn't focus well because it likes to focus on the paper and then my hand and then my paper and then my hand. So it goes in and out of focus a lot, and I'm trying to figure that out. So the first thing I do is I go with a 1.0 Copic multiliner, and I go around the main, like what I want to be the centerpiece of the work. And then I'm going to go with a 0.5, and then anything else that's major details like the sage and the sweetgrass braid, I'm going to go around those on the outside as well. And then I'll come in with a really, really fine microliner to do all the inside detail work. And it's kind of inspired by like Art Nouveau, how it has a thick outline and then thin detailed inlines and shadowing and things like that. But the outside's got a very thick aesthetic, and I really like that. Art Nouveau is probably my favorite art style, but I am not good enough to do that yet. And so I kind of have this, I don't know, I've kind of figured out this little niche where it's inspired by it. It has the thick outer lines and the thin inner lines, and I really like it a lot. It's a little bit different. I'm sure it's not unique or anything, even though I figured it out on my own. It doesn't mean other people don't have the same kind of style. But yeah, so the little I just finished outlining the sage, and now I'm starting to outline all the little tobaccos, which is typically used dried up in little pieces. So that's why I drew it like that way instead of as like a tobacco leaf, like the whole leaf. So while I'm outlining, I will tell some stories, I think. I'm trying to think of some more stories from my grandmother I could tell, because I told all of her stories about her growing up in the Haunted Hollow and all of those, well, not growing up, but living in the Haunted Hollow. I did get a couple of things wrong. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's some stories I told during one of my Equinox Let's Play reviews. Um, I could always tell it again in an art video if you guys want me to, or you can go back and watch that. I'll link it down below for you guys if you want. So if you want to check that out. So I told those stories, but my grandma does have some other spooky stories. I have lots of spooky stories, so I think I'll do that. Outlining is like my favorite part of any artwork, more than the drawing it, more than painting it or anything like that. I love doing line work. I'm not the best at it though. I'm still learning, but and if you do notice, I do follow the lines, but at the same time, sometimes I make decisions like oh, hey, I want this to be a little different here, so I don't follow the lines exactly all the time. But yeah, it's kind of like a flow with the moment type of a thing. So I've actually already drawn this, and this is like, I have a master that's already outlined that I keep that's like black and white. So that way when I redraw it, I have it to look at and things like that. And it just makes the drawing it again for doing Copic easier and watercolors. And if you notice, see right here, I actually forgot to do a little cedar branch that was supposed to be right here, and I noticed that. So just gonna add them in. I have no idea if it's the same shape as the one that's supposed to be there that's on my first drawing, but so all of them are a little different. And then when I'm done inking this and coloring it in with Copics, then I'll scan it in, and that'll become my art print. And then I'll do the same thing with a watercolor, and I'll do that too. Right now I'm just showing you guys the lining process. And but yeah, after I'm done with this, you'll get to see how I use my Copics, and then after that, how I use my watercolors. And I will hopefully get better at filming these. I can't get a better camera yet. I can't do that until these actually start making, I get enough views that I start making some kind of money. And if I never do, that's fine. I will just keep using this camera. But I can't justify it until I've gotten some kind of income from this. So right now, basically, I'm just doing it for fun. All right, so on to my spooky stories. So I told, I'm going to make some corrections to the other stories that I was talking to my mom, and I was asking her for, like, hey, I told these stories, and is there anything, because it's been a while since I've heard them, and these aren't things that happen to me. And she was like, oh, here's a couple of things. So in the one where my grandmother was visited by the two like mysterious people, they were actually two women and not a guy and a girl. It was two women. And the ones that told her they had to name her son a specific name. And they actually said that if she named him John Paul, that he would become a man of God and a preacher, which he did not do. So they were wrong, and that he'd be evil if they didn't. So I originally just thought they had said that he would be evil if they didn't, if she didn't name him that. But no, they actually specifically said he'd become a pastor, and yeah, he did not become a pastor. So that was, oh, and then the room that was all black, apparently after they opened it up, they did actually, I thought they just opened it up and it freaked my grandmother out, and then so she had it reboarded up, but actually they opened it up for a while and repainted the inside, and after they had finished repainting the inside, the stuff in the house just increased so dramatically, and every time my grandmother was in there, because she was going to use it for one of the boys to have their own bedroom, and every time she was in there, it just freaked her out so much that they did reborder it, but after they painted it. So it was just no longer all black. So that was pretty much it. And I also found out that that the haunted farm, was in Virginia. So some more spooky stories. Ugh, hands hurt. Carpal tunnel's acting up. Hang on. A little better. Okay. These little cedar things, they really take it out of you. Okay, so it's all the little wigglies. So another story my grandmother told my mom was that in Virginia somewhere there is a bar, and there is a burned handprint in the bar wall or on the bar door, and that the legend that the bar tells is that the devil came there one day and burned his hand print into the bar. So I'm going to do some research and pop that in here and see if I can find any bars that claim that. And my mom doesn't remember if that was in Virginia or West Virginia, but so many little cedar doodles. Okay, so some more things about my grandmother is that she was born on the winter solstice, and she was half Native American and half African American. But she lied and said she was Spanish so she could marry my grandpa, who is, or was rather, 100% German. And he was super racist and never believed she was anything but Spanish, despite the fact that she would speak Lakota to my brother. And my brother, because I was very, very young, my brother knew her a lot better than I did. He's about 7 years older than me. And my brother and her were like super best friends. And they just had a very strong bond. And she would speak all these words to him, and went later when he was, and she'd tell him what they meant, right? Ah, hands. All right, I'm going to start on the sweetgrass rope now. The braid here. So, oh, where was I? Okay, so my brother, right, didn't know exactly what language she was teaching him because she wouldn't tell him, but she told him, like, phrases, and this is what it meant, and they kind of just spoke this little language to each other. And then when he was older and she had passed on, um, she passed when I was 2, so I didn't get the same bonding with her. I don't remember her, which is sad, but he does. And anyway, after she passed, he went and looked up all these phrases and found out that it was Lakota. So that's the only reason we know what our background is. And my grandfather's genetics played through. So me and my mom look pretty much 100% German. And my brother, though, looks Native American. Like, I have blonde hair. It was really, really blonde when I was a kid, but it's like a light brown now almost. And same with my mom, and we both have blue eyes, but my brother has dark hair and brown eyes. All right, I'm going to switch to my teeny tiny 0.05 to do all the detail work. But yeah, so my brother has dark hair and brown eyes, and his skin is kind of a light color, but it's much darker than mine, and when he's in the sun, he gets really, really dark, whereas I just kind of burn. And it was to the point where people thought my mom was lying when she said he was her son, and like, when he was in high school, people would say, like, we went to like a play where my brother was in it, and because he was in drama, and they were like, "Oh, who you're here to see?" And I said, "Oh, my brother," and told him, said his name, and they were like, "He can't possibly be related to you." And I'm just like, you can't really say that. Like, genetics are weird. Ugh, this little part right here is giving me some trouble. Okay. But yeah, so for the longest time, we didn't know actually what native tribe she was from until my brother did some research when he was around 18 or so. And then we knew. So I always thought that was really interesting that, you can't really tell because me and my brother don't look like we're from the same family, like at all. Oh, and then all of his kids ended up blonde hair with blue eyes, so go figure. Since he carries that recessive gene. All right, so that's a little bit about my grandma and like that. So I will tell you a couple more of her spooky stories that she would tell my mom. Eventually, I'll get to telling my mom stories. I think my mom has the most freakiest stories, but mine are like very tame compared to hers, but I have a lot of them. But hers are kind of nuts, like just bonkers. All right, so when my grandmother was about 5, she was sleeping in the middle of the night and she just felt odd and woke up. And at the end of her bed, she saw her grandmother. And her grandmother told her, I died and I've come to say goodbye. And then, she was 5 and, oh, I'm out of frame. Hang on. There we go. So, she got freaked out as you do, and she screamed, and her grandmother disappeared, but she woke up the whole house, and her mom came into the room and was like, "What's going on?" And, "Did you have a nightmare?" And she's like, "No, my grandmother died. She came to tell me she died." And then about 5 minutes later, her uncle, her mom's brother, came over to tell the family that the that her grandmother, the mom and uncle's mom had died uh, about the same time frame, like not very long ago. They lived really close together. And then when she was living, oh, here's a Hainted Holler story. When she was living on the Hainted Holler farm, she had just put her boys down for a nap, and she was lying on the couch and she was looking out. Like, the front room had these really big windows that the couch faced, and she was laying down to take a nap since the boys were taking a nap, since she had, I think, 4 by that time. And she ended up having 6 kids altogether. My mom's the baby and the only blonde, the only one that took after her dad. Everybody else has dark hair and brown eyes. But yeah, so she was laying down to take a nap, and she saw out the window as she was laying down. She was looking out the window, and she saw in the sky a carriage riding across the sky, and it had 4 white horses. And on the carriage, or driving the carriage, was her aunt. And her aunt waved to her and blew her a kiss. And so she knew that, like, deep down, she just knew that that her aunt had died. I'm just adding some little swirly details because dried tobacco tends to be um like kind of rolled up into little balls almost, and it has a lot of wrinkles and crinkles and stuff. And let's see, I'm trying to think of another story from my grandmother. Okay, yeah. Let's see. One time, oh, I had mentioned that she was born on the winter solstice, and her mother, my great-grandmother, had told her that that meant that she was going to have visions and see spirits and things like that. Um, that seems to be the case, I guess. She certainly had a lot of weird and freaky things. So this right here is braided sweetgrass, and sweetgrass is like, well, it's a type of grass, and you dry it out, and then you make braids with it, and that's how you use it. You can use it other ways. It's just the easiest to do. So right now, I'm just adding the details of all the little fine grass that are braided together here. I'm making sure it's not absolutely perfect because the grass doesn't go, um, you know, all one direction or anything. So let's see. Ah, yes. One time, my grandmother dreamed that her uncle and her father had died on her uncle's motorcycle. So she begged them not to ride the motorcycle anymore and to like just get rid of it. And, if he really needed a motorcycle, to buy a different one. And her dad promised to never ride on it ever again for her. And he didn't. And then a week later, her uncle died he got in a crash and died on the motorcycle. And then I think I'll tell this one because it'll link into a lot of my other stories I tell later. I'll probably tell a lot of spooky stories because I just have so many spooky stories. I think that's the number one type of story I have, actually, is spooky stories. So if you don't like spooky stories, I'm sorry. I do have other stories about just like working retail and just interesting things that have happened, but most of the things I have that are, something that not a lot of people have experienced are just weird, odd happenings and growing up in haunted houses. And it started way back with my grandmother. So yeah, and I'll be putting them into these art videos and into my Let's Plays and just here and there. So let's see. I know I have a couple more from my grandmother before I get into my mom's stories. Oh yeah, the one that links all of our family stories together, kind of. Mine, my mom's, and my grandmother's. So my mom's dad was just like the best guy ever. And he was very protective of his family and my grandmother, his daughter, like really looked up to him and had a really strong bond with him. And most of her things were, kind of about him and things like that. So she started having these dreams after she had moved away. And oh, I get to start on the bird now. Oh, here we go. Okay, so she had been having these dreams that he was going to die, that somebody was going to murder him. And so she wrote him a letter telling him not to walk in alleys because in her dream he went down an alley and he was murdered. And so she wrote him a letter because, this was before phones were really used often and things like that. And she thought maybe the letter wouldn't get there in time. So she got on a bus because she just felt this sense of urgency. She got on a bus and rode to from this was in Florida. So she got on a bus in Tampa and rode to her father's house, which was in Dade County. And specifically in the letter, she told him to take taxis and not walk anywhere. Because in the dream, he was walking from one place to another and cut down an alley and got murdered. So when she got off the bus, the state police met her and they took her to the police station to tell her that he had been murdered. Now, how that wraps up into some of my mom's stories and some of my stories is that since he passed, he's been seen by like as a spirit by my mother when she was a small child several times, and he had a very distinctive, like his hair had like some was like dark with some white streaks at the temples, so it was pretty distinctive. And she saw him the first time she saw him, she was 2, and she was walking through the house and she saw this man she didn't know in her mother's bedroom. And so she went and told her mother and described him. And her mother went and got, a picture of her dad and was like, was this him? And she was like, yes. And so he's been, he just kind of shows up and he's kind of like the protector of the family. We have a nickname for him because at first there was a lot of weird things that happened that we couldn't explain in various houses and things like protecting things, which I'll get into later, but like, just little things here and there. And so we're like, oh, we have like a protecting spirit. And so we gave him a nickname, the nickname Charlie. And whenever we'd feel something, like when I was a kid, I would feel bad things. Like I'd wake up in the middle of the night and from like terrible, terrible nightmares and just feel like something bad was in my room. And I would call out for Charlie. And then it was like a wave of good, nice kindness just washed through the room and got rid of all the bad feelings. And so we kind of just used him as a protector. Charlie's not his real name. It was a nickname we gave him, just for dealing with like, one, it was like all my aunts and uncles at first didn't know who this spirit was because before my mom was born, no one had actually seen him. So they didn't know who the spirit was. They just knew that there was a spirit that protected all the kids, and they'd see things occasionally, like things moving on their own and stuff like that. So they had already given him the nickname Charlie, and then when my mom figured out who he was, then the name was already kind of there, so they just didn't change it. So, for an example of how Charlie was like a protecting spirit, was that my mom and her best friend at the time, when she was like 8, were walking alone through some woods, and she felt someone grab her and pull her backwards. And so instinctively, she grabbed her friends, like somebody like grabbed her shirt, the back of her shirt, and pulled her backwards. And she felt this sense of like something bad was going to happen if she kept walking forward. So she instinctively reached out and grabbed her friend, the back of her friend's shirt, and pulled her backwards too. And at the same time, she felt that. Let's see. I'm almost done, so I should wrap this up. So, anyway, yeah, so she grabbed her friend and pulled her backwards. And then this huge, like, Widowmaker limb fell on the sidewalk. There was like a paved path. But this huge limb fell right where they would have been if they hadn't been pulled backwards. And then she heard a man's voice in her ear say, "Love you, grandbaby." And then she like looked around and nobody was there. So that's what I mean by he's a protecting spirit. Now this outline here on the hummingbird isn't quite thick enough for me. I like it a little thicker. So I'm going to get my 1.0 back, and I'm going to go re-thicken up these lines here and to make the hummingbird stand out a little better from all of the medicines here. So I'm just going to go re-back over it and kind of do a double line. That's not like the only time that Charlie has helped somebody in the family, but that's when that's like how we know it was him, really, between my mom seeing him when she was a small girl and then him saying that to her that one time. I've had instances where something definitely protected me, but I've never seen Charlie, and I don't think I've ever heard him talk to me. I have heard a man's voice before, right before weird things happen, so it could have been him, but it could have been something else too, and I'm not 100% sure. But dang it, focus, camera. But Charlie seems to like to, whoever is the youngest child, kind of take care of that one. And he does kind of play favorites. I know that he did some stuff with my brother, and I'll tell you those stories next time because I'm almost done with this. But he hung out with my brother and did some stuff with my brother, but he mostly, of my grandmother's kids, he mostly was around my mom, and then of my mom's kids, he was mostly with me. But then again, I think my brother could take care of himself a little bit better than I could. He got really into, like, you know, learning how to protect his space early because of all the nasty things that would kind of show up and try to mess with you to feed off your fear. And it wasn't until I was like 13 that I looked that stuff up. Whereas my brother, I think my grandmother showed my brother how to do that from the time he was like 7. All right, so now I just really gotta erase all of the pencil marks. And I already have the second one, because I need 2 of these, one for Copics and one for watercolors. They're on different papers. So there's the second one. All right, I will see you guys next time.